Good evening, all of you. Happy Dhanteras, and I welcome you all to the webinar masterclass on thoracoscopy on behalf of CCI. CCI, Chest Council of India, is now comprising of more than 3,000 pulmonologists and is way beyond than any other educational group. It grows beyond the professional rivalries and egos, and everyone is there to help each other to grow in knowledge, to grow in your wisdom, and helps each other in many ways. I am a proud member of CCI. I thank the office bearers, Dr. Narendra and Dr. Ravi Dosi, to have given me this opportunity to moderate this session. And I also thank Dr. Krishna and Dr. Narayana Pradeep to have laid faith in me that I could have conducted this. Our speaker for today's session would be Dr. Vijay Kumar, who is a senior consultant pulmonologist and a therapeutic bronchoscopist at Apollo Health City, Hyderabad. He has done more than 600 thoracoscopies and definitely is a master of the subject. I now hand over to Dr. Vijay Kumar, please.
Thank you, Dr. Ema, for such a warm welcome. And thank you, my dear brother, Dr. N.H. Krishna, founder chairman, Dr. Ravi Dosi, Dr. Narendra Metuku, Dr. Atri, Dr. Narayan Pradeepa, for giving me this wonderful opportunity to talk on masterclass on thoracoscopy, how I do it, and what are the various intricacies in management of thoracoscopy and related issues. So, good evening, my dear friends and CCI colleagues. This evening, I'm bringing warm welcome, warm wishes from this place, Apollo Jubilee Hills, Apollo Health City, where I'm working as a senior pulmonologist and therapeutic bronchoscopist and therapeutic thoracoscopist. And with this short, we will go ahead into the presentation. So today we will be discussing on what is the history of thoracoscopy, how it was invented, what are the differences between medical thoracoscopy and VATS, indication and contraindication, how to pick cases, particularly when you are in beginning of career, not to pick odd cases, complications of thoracoscopy, and interesting case presentation. So at this junction, I would love to highlight one of my colleagues' interesting history. I must not name, but he's a very good friend of mine who, hey, when he started his practice, he started in a private nursing home, okay, a case of thoracoscopy. And the first case itself, it start bled profusely. And this case has happened almost 10 years back. Just minding you, okay, he has not started his thoracoscopy work since then, even after a decade after. That means careful selection of cases, careful execution of case, a good outcome is very essential, okay, in managing these interventions. So thoracoscopy was first conceived thoracoscopy was first conceived in 1866 by Richard in a case where an 11-year-old girl, when she was presented with empyema, he has introduced or devised he has designed the thoracoscopy and then introduced into the pleural space and then drained the empyema for the first time. And widespread use of thoracoscopy was facilitated after 1910 by Jacobius, and popularly it is known as Jacobius operation. He created a pneumothorax by severing the adhesions, what we call now as adhesiolysis, using galvanocautery, and he advocated thoracoscopy guided biopsies for pleural effusion of undeterminate etiology, and applied thoracoscopy both as diagnostic and therapeutic tool. It is though Richard introduced the thoracoscopy, it's a Jacobius who made it, renowned. So various terminology that we use: thoracoscopy has a broader sense, medical thoracoscopy, fluoroscopy, video assisted thoracoscopy. Medical thoracoscopy is performed in an endoscopy suite or operating room under conscious sedation and local anesthesia. Whereas surgical thoracoscopy or video assisted thoracoscopy is performed in an operating room, and it will be performed only in the theater under general anesthesia and selective intubation of the lung. So, whereas fluoroscopy is often used in synonymous with medical thoracoscopy. So of late, chest physicians are widely used using medical thoracoscopy, and it has become the second most important endoscopic technique after bronchoscopy in respiratory medicine practice. And with the introduction of flexi-rigid scope in late 1990s, all interventional pulmonologists who performs thoracoscopy have been using this procedure widely. And what is this anatomy of flexi-rigid scope? Flexi-rigid scope, it was launched by Olympus people, and it consists of the handle and the shaft, and the handle, the shaft consists of the outer diameter of the shaft is 7 millimeter, whereas 27 centimeter in length. Whereas the shaft is, the proximal portion of the shaft is 22 centimeters and it is rigid, whereas distal 5 centimeters is flexible. And this is why it is called as flexi-rigid scope. And it is quite user friendly. Those who uses bronchoscopy, who does bronchoscopy easily, they all can, use this flexi-rigid scope very easily. Maneuverability is very easy when you are doing procedures with flexi-rigid scope. The flexible tip is movable by a lever at the handle, and which allows two-way angulation, forward angulation and backward angulation. Forward angulation is 160 degrees forward, and backward angulation is retroflexion is 130 degrees. And for routine and simple procedures, flexi-rigid scope works very well, and it has got 2.8 mm working channel which can accommodate the biopsy forceps, needles and other accessories like electrosurgical things and laser probes very comfortably. And on top of it, it is this equipment is very easily autoclavable. So looking at the anatomy of rigid bronchoscopy, or rigid thoracoscopy equipment. So look at what essentials is: a telescope, sometimes 0 degree, sometimes 30-degree scopes are available in the market. Particularly when beginners are there, okay, I recommend to restrict them to usage of 0-degree scope. Whereas once you have good hands-on experiences, probably few maybe 100 cases like that, and you start doing very advanced cases, then 30-degree scope, and then there is a scope called endochemelion, which will facilitate in viewing angle of almost 90 degrees as well. So selection of scope is very important. Trocar and cannula. Okay, various sizes of trocar and cannula. So at least the based on the telescope size, sometimes it is 5 mm, sometimes it is 10 mm. Okay, based on the size, you have to use the appropriate size trocar and cannula. And if you are limiting to biopsy for biopsy or simple adhesionolysis, probably the second port may be the trocar requirement may be very smaller. Maybe 5 mm port is also is sufficient. Camera head and cautery equipment, endoscopic instruments, okay, like dissectors, electrocautery, and other accessories like when you want to do a pleurodesis, talc pleurodesis, you need to have an insufflator, this balloon, and please remember if you are doing therapeutic thoracoscopy, make sure that you have a thoracotomy set along with the thoracoscopic surgeon is your side. So at least you should inform all your cases when you are beginning your career. All cases, including simple biopsy forceps, pleural biopsy, should be informed to your surgical colleagues so that they will be in the backup and they will help you and when you are in trouble. And calling them in the last minute, okay, is a very awkward situation. Please, my dear friends, remember always when you are doing a thoracoscopic procedure, simple biopsy also, okay, in the beginning of your career, make sure you inform your surgical colleagues. Whereas even however you got your advanced training, how much experience you have, assume that every case can give rise to some or other complication. That's why very importantly, and when you are doing advanced procedures, all the cases you should have a standby. That means whenever it started bleeding or whenever you encounter a laceration or something, you should inform your surgeon on a phone call. He should be available within 10 to 15 minutes time. And indications of where are you going to use your semi-rigid fluoroscope or you are going to use rigid thoracoscope. So looking at if you are performing only diagnostic fluoroscopy for undetermined indeterminate uncomplicated pleural effusion where suspicion of mesothelioma is not high, then a semi-rigid fluoroscopy is enough, and the procedure can be completed under local anesthesia. But when you encounter, okay, trapped lung, radiologically thickened pleura, endoscopic infiltrated pleura, mesothelioma is suspected, there are plenty of pleuropulmonary adhesions, there is an empyema with split pleural sign in the radiology, loculated pleural effusion, and pneumothorax with bullae and blebs. These are all the indications where you will end up in doing, some degree of high-end procedures. So that's why it is very, very important to be, to choose your scope. So these are the places where I would love to have a rigid thoracoscope rather than semi-rigid thoracoscope. This we discussed. So here in the image, on the first image, we are showing, retroflexion to the tune of 130 degrees. And this can be, the tip can be moved forward by 160 degrees forward as well. So what are the contraindications of the procedure? Lack of pleural space due to adhesions is the only absolute contraindication. So look at this image where you can, if you see this kind of space, okay, then it is very difficult to get into the pleural space. That's why as a pulmonologist, you are not going to, venture into such case. So can this be identified clinically in advance? Yes. Clinico-radiologically, these kind of cases are better, identified well in advance so that you go along with your surgical colleague into at least, when you are beginning your career and until you get, enough hands-on experience. So when you insinuate your fingers into the chest wall, okay, between the ribs, there is hardly any space. So such a cases where intercostal narrowing is very prominent, you must not, venture such cases individually. So, and looking at, radiologically, in CT scans and chest X-rays. If there is a significant intercostal narrowing, better you are not going to enter into this pleural space alone. Better go with your surgical friend. So what are the relative contraindications? Respiratory insufficiency requiring mechanical ventilation and intolerable hypoxemia unrelated to pleural effusion. Maybe patient is having a pulmonary embolism. Okay, those are the cases, or cardiovascular instability. So bleeding diathesis, uncorrected bleeding diathesis, patient is having refractory cough. So these are the cases where you are not, there are relative contraindications. Correct the bleeding diathesis, stabilize the patient cardiovascularly, and if at all if there is any correctable cause of hypoxemia, correct this before taking the case to theater. So technique: the patient is first placed in the lateral decubitus position with affected side up and arm above the head. Patient's vital parameters and ECG, blood pressure, oxygenation are continuously monitored. Single port access sited between 4th and 7th intercostal space of the chest wall has to be marked, particularly in the mid-axillary line, using either 5 to 10 mm trocar, and for a diagnostic fluoroscopy, this is sufficient. And you can also combine, after pleural biopsy, if it appears like malignant on frozen section, then you can combine a Talc port ridge as well in the same sitting. Whereas second port might be necessary to facilitate if you are doing a therapeutic work like additional lysis and the drainage of complex, complicated, loculated pleural effusion. If you are contemplating lung biopsy, second port is very, very essential. So a single port often suffices. The single port often suffices for the thoracoscopy performed using a flexi-rigid fluoroscope. At the end of the diagnostic thoracoscopy or therapeutic thoracoscopy, 1 or 2 chest tubes. If it is diagnostic thoracoscopy, a single chest tube is inserted, and as you close up for the intercostal tube drainage, you will be closing the wound incision site and then fix the chest tube to the chest wall. If Talc fluorosis or lung biopsy is performed, the patient requires hospitalization for a period of monitoring and chest tube drainage. Otherwise, if it is a simple diagnostic procedure, we can use we can discharge the patient on daycare basis as well. So various cases where polypoidal masses with candle wax nodules, and on top right you will see therapeutic fluorosis, Talc fluorosis. Right bottom, there is a case of patchy pleuritis of early mesothelioma, and left bottom sago nodules of tuberculosis. These are the classical appearances in respective cases. Do we need to apply cryoprobe in thoracoscopy? Yes, you can apply, but there is no gross evidence. Okay, when you use cryoprobe, that it is going to add any additional values. Be careful when you are using cryo. It's better, you should also expect for more bleeding in such cases. So you should prepare to tackle the bleeding when you are using cryoprobe on parietal pleura. Make sure, other important thing is, make sure the probe doesn't touch the lung. Otherwise, it will land in laceration of the lung. So when to do this thoracoscopy, the recommendation at my unit are, okay, yes, establishing the cause of undiagnosed exudative pleural effusion, additional lysis, and Talc fluorosis, pneumothorax management, evaluation of diffuse parenchymal lung disease for obtaining the lung biopsy, and intrapleural foreign body retrieval, which is very rare. We are going to discuss that case. What scope I am going to use? Okay, yes, if it is a simple diagnostic procedure, so my choice would be Wolf 7 mm scope, whereas therapeutic procedure, my choice would be a rigid scope. So I always suggest, my dear colleagues, please go ahead with and you start using your at least in initial 50 to 100 cases, 0 degree scope is better. And once you get familiarized with the equipments, you can advance yourself to either endochameleon or 30-degree scope. Flexi rigid scope versus rigid scope. Yes, my choice as I do a lot of therapeutic work. My choice always for diagnostic and therapeutic, including both cases, I prefer a rigid scope always. And based on the indication, I will pick whether a single port technique. There are plenty of additional lysis cases which I have performed using single port. Okay, uniportal empyema drainage, uniportal multiloculated pleural effusion drainage also it is feasible with experience. But in the beginning, I would always love to go for 2-port or 3-port technique. And yes, where to perform these cases? It's a sterile procedure. Remember, okay, you should not, by any chance, you should not give infection, additional infection after procedure. In these cases, in my experience, out of 600 to 700 cases of thoracoscopy, which I have performed over past more than decade, okay, I have had a one case where post management of pneumothorax, patient developed empyema as a complication. Otherwise, if you do the procedure very, strictly using aseptic precautions, and if you start doing the procedure in OR, unlikely to develop any infection. So a well-equipped bronchoscopy suite is sufficient, provided the conditions and then monitoring and provided an anesthetist will be by the patient side, so that any issues they can manage it. So for a diagnostic work, but otherwise for therapeutic work, always pick a OT setting. Though in the beginning of one's career, it is very difficult to get OT slots, very cumbersome. We have to fight with sometimes with anesthetists and surgeons as well. But a friendly request and posting the case well in advance of 2 or 3 days will also will be helpful tip to facilitate to get a early slot in the morning. And how to work up? If the carefully look for a history of any anticoagulants and NSAIDs and antiplatelets usage in these patients. The patient is having any anticoagulants, antiplatelets, and NSAID usage, and I recommend okay, at least 5 days prior to the procedure we should stop all these things and rule out any active or recent coronary artery disease. If there is a history, please stabilize the patient before taking up the case. And routine parameters and like CBP, RFT, PTINR, APTT, ECG, 2D echo, viral screening, and are mandatory before performing a thoracoscopy. And viral screening is mandatory because high risk of splash of this pleural effusion will be there, pleural fluid will be there. And one important thing, I would like to, tell you is pre-procedural ultrasound chest is always mandatory. What I do at my unit is, okay, I post the case. Then if the case is for tomorrow morning, in the today's evening, what I'll do is I'll take the patient to radiology room and get myself, I'll check whether, what is the status of effusion. If it is, whether it is uniloculated collection or multiloculated collection, whether it is posterior loculation, anterior loculation, and I'll mark my position with, permanent skin marker in the recommended position of the patient for, that is lateral decubitus position with the affected side high up. To plan the port of entry, okay, preferably to make sure that you are not coming across any significant pleural nodules, that is large side pleural nodules will always carry huge amount of blood vessels in it. So when you are carefully placing the port, make sure that you take ultrasound guidance so that you will not hit these pleural nodules, okay, while you pierce. At least large size pleural nodules or pleural masses should not be punctured while inserting the trocar. So always important. Do not assume any case as yes, it's a low risk case. Make sure that you assess the case properly and then take informed consent. Explain the need and the procedure and most common complications associated with, like what we encounter. Most common complications are bleeding, sometimes maybe infection, very rarely lung perforation. Sometimes we may encounter re-expansion pulmonary edema. Of course, thank God, I haven't seen, at least, in my cases, re-expansion pulmonary edema as of now. So even in the reported literature, re-expansion pulmonary edema chances after thoracoscopy is very rare. Sometimes we may encounter persistent air leak and rarely death. Particularly when we are doing advanced therapeutic procedures, you may encounter mortality as well. And thank God again, okay, I haven't encountered any mortality so far. And consent for talc porterage is very important because it may be associated with risk of ARDS. And again, and with the latest silica available, okay, the chance of the ARDS is very negligible in my practice and in our modern day practice. Anesthesia, local versus general anesthesia, depending on the case. Diagnostic procedures, maybe you can prefer local anesthesia, whereas therapeutic procedures, and always go for W-Ment tube with isolation of the lung under general anesthesia. Procedure wise, okay, it's a simple procedure. Yes, we should not assume it as simple procedure, but to be frank, okay, to give some confidence to my junior colleagues, it is as simple as a chest drain. Stand facing the anterior chest with the monitor behind the patient's back. So small 1 to 2 inch incision. Okay, 2 inch incision will be big, but in presence of intercostal tube, intercostal narrowing, you may end up in giving bigger size incision. Okay, and these incisions should be given at the pre-marked area as per the ultrasound, and allow some 10 breaths so that to allow air into the pleura, and intermittently while suctioning. Biopsy to be taken preferably in the dorsolateral chest wall due to ease and accessibility. What is very important is, okay, you are not supposed to, you are a pulmonologist, you are not a thoracic surgeon. Your job is go there, take the biopsy or finish the procedure and then come back. You are not supposed to meddle with visceral pleura, and do not reach hilum at any cost. That is not your area of interest. Your area of interest, at least in initial 100 cases, is restrict yourself to dorsolateral pleura, dorsolateral chest wall, then take the biopsy and then do, if at all, if you want to do any pleurodesis, do it and finish your job and come back. And make sure whatever the specimen that is collected, you collect the specimen both in saline and formalin, because sometimes visually the larger nodules, they may appear as a malignancy for visualization, but you may end up in diagnosing it as tuberculosis. Hence, unless it is proven otherwise, make sure you collect the sample in both the saline and formalin. Saline sample should be sent to microbiology, whereas formalin sample to send to histopathology. And no difference in yield from size of biopsy, whether you get biopsy from a rigid scope using rigid thoracoscope or flexi rigid thoracoscope, it doesn't matter. You could use cautery to control bleeding if any bleeding occurs. Talc pleurodesis could be done after the biopsies are taken, and no difference in the efficacy of pleurodesis as per the latest literature, whether you are doing porterage or you are doing slurry. And post procedure, always do place a chest drain. After therapeutic procedure, sometimes you may need to place 2 chest drains, one anterior and another posterior. Watch for bleeding at least in initial 24 hours, and look for any drop in hemoglobin from pre-op hemoglobin to post-op hemoglobin. If there is sometimes there may be a bleeder, unidentified bleeder within the, and then it may not be draining as well. So if there is a drop in hemoglobin, probably we may need to re-explore the case. And most common side effect after the procedure is fever, and pretty much controllable with paracetamol. And generally, if it is a diagnostic procedure, we could remove the drain the day after the procedure. And what are the various complications, okay, that are documented in the literature? Okay, generally, when you are using for diagnostic workup or using a flexi-rigid, there are no major side effects. Particularly, there is no mortality reported in various publications. Whereas, if it is therapeutic, the chance of having if you injure the lung, prolonged air leak is a possibility. Hemorrhage, subcutaneous emphysema, post-operative fever, which is most common thing, and sometimes iatrogenic infection can lead to empyema, wound infections, cardiac arrhythmias, hypotension, and forget not, these malignancies, particularly mesothelioma and mucinous adenocarcinoma, can seed the chest wall as well. These are the common complications what we see. So what is this, my dear friends? So when you are attempting to place a trocar, okay, if you have a short trocar, then please be careful. Okay, avoid using short trocar. Short trocars can give rise to laceration of the lung. Of course, thank God this case was well managed with without any suture, it got healed. But such a laceration can end up in prolonged air leak, and we should always try to avoid injuring the lung while placing the trocar. And what are the, as per literature, the major complications are mortality in the diagnostic group, which is almost nil, whereas therapeutic probably very less, 0.1%, lung laceration, bleeding, re-expansion pulmonary edema, prolonged air leak, mediastinal emphysema are the major complications that are documented, whereas minor complications are subcutaneous emphysema, pain, fever, cutaneous infection at the entry site are the minor complications. Look at the complication rate. Therapeutic cases, definitely there are more complications. Among the therapeutic cases, okay, pleurodesis, adenolysis, and bulla electrocoagulation, you see pain as the most common complication, whereas fever as the most common complication in cases of post-pleurodesis. And we must use antipyretic at least in the first 24 hours to control the fever. After adenolysis, the chance of pain is much high, and when you are managing any pneumothorax, particularly when you combine with parietal pleural stripping, the chance of having a complication like post-op pain is pretty high. So conclusion, generally medical thoracoscopy under local anesthesia is pretty safe and effective. And if therapeutic thoracoscopy you are planning, then the chance of having a complication rate is high. We all must be aware that no procedure is safe, and we must counsel them well in advance so that we have a safer and quality based outcome. What is the single most important step when we are doing thoracoscopy? The single most important step is getting into the pleural space. So give a proper incision, and then when you are going, so this is how it looks. Carefully get into the pleural space and then examine. Once you start examining using your telescope, you will see a lot of fluid, lot of dorsolateral chest wall, collapsed lung, and make sure you drain all this fluid and then reinsert your telescope so that you will have a better vision. So for therapeutic cases, if you want to place any second port, two important things that you must follow is, first important thing is you should always place under vision, whereas second important thing is from first port, okay, you should place at least a hand breadth away, select a site and then place the second port at a hand breadth away. So look at this case where this is a sharp trocar, okay. So when you are inserting sharp, as soon as you reach the pleural space, you withdraw the sharp trocar outside and then insert the cannula inside. So whenever you may encounter bleeding, then you should be prepared enough to use cautery. Particularly, I recommend to use long tip Bowie whenever you are using therapeutic cases. So most feared complication for any pulmonologist is bleeding, bleeding, bleeding. Because yes, out of many cases, okay, which case going to enter into bleed more. So to prevent the bleeding, always we should try to take the biopsy on the inner surface of the rib rather than in the intercostal space, rather than in between the ribs. So that we can avoid a bleeding. So whenever we encounter bleeding, either monopolar or bipolar cautery should be very handy. Look at this case. I was doing a parietal pleural biopsy. It started bleeding, after parietal pleural biopsy. Okay, it has bled profusely. At this time, it is very important. Your telescope should not be, distracted. You should focus on the bleeder site carefully. Get a gauge piece from the second port and then start applying the pressure. This is the single most important step one must do when we encounter a massive bleeder like this. This is a bleeding from the intercostal artery. And get a gauge piece and then through the second port apply the pressure. Yes, apply pressure for 2 to 3 minutes. If the coagulation parameters are pretty normal, platelet count is normal, then most of these cases will be salvaged then and there. Meanwhile, if it is not controlled, you can take surgeon's help as well. So look at this. After applying 3 minutes of pressure, active bleeding is controlled. Then now I will be applying the using long tip Bowie monopolar cautery. I will be applying the cautery and then cauterizing the entire base of the bleeder area so that it will not bleed further. So be careful in these cases, and most of the thoracoscopic cases after therapeutic work, make sure you are not using NSAIDs, because sometimes when there is too much of raw area, these NSAIDs may facilitate bleeding. So hence my suggestion is post-operatively for management of pain, do not use NSAIDs at your units. So sometimes we may need to use bipolar cautery to coagulate the bleeder. So some interesting cases in next 20 minutes. This is a case of bilateral concurrent VATS, multi-port additional lysis on bilateral. It took almost 6 hours for me to do this case on both sides additional lysis. 21-year male, thorn prick, had a history of thorn prick. Progressively, there was a swelling in the left lower limb, managed at the outside hospital, and fasciotomy was offered for the thorn prick area. And as he developed breathing difficulty, then he was shifted to our unit. So then what has happened? He was presented with dry cough, worsening, shortness of breath, high-grade fever and with chills, and left lower lobe swelling and generalized weakness. He was conscious in ER, oriented, tachycardia, tachypnea, febrile 103 Fahrenheit, no pallor, no cyanosis, pedal edema was there in the left lower limb, and there was a left lower limb fasciotomy incision is noted. On auscultation, there was bilateral air entry with diffuse crepitations. He was maintaining oxygenation with 92% saturation with 4 liter oxygen. BP support was there. On 4 ml of noradrenaline, single strength, he was maintaining barely 70/50. So after fluid resuscitation using crystalloids and low dose norad support, his BP was stabilized. Hemodynamically, he became stable. Initial investigations revealed reduced PO2 levels, and CBP revealed anemic, and platelets were normal, elevated total leukocyte count. Serum creatinine was normal, potassium was 3.5, LFT was showing hypoalbuminemia. We have done, as there is a lower limb swelling and then there is a breathlessness, we suspected is there any element of pulmonary embolism. Initially, we got the venous Doppler done. which revealed a left popliteal vein thrombosis and posterior tibial vein thrombosis. And the chest X-ray revealed bilateral diffuse opacities with a bilateral CP angle blunting. Wound swab has been sent for cultures from the lower limb. And with this background, we have gone up and then sent for offered for CT pulmonary angio to rule out any spread of deep venous thrombus into the lungs and to rule out any significant pulmonary embolism. X-ray showing multiple fluffy opacities with bilateral CP angle blunting, almost ARDS picture. So we started the patients on broad spectrum antibiotics and other supportive medication, including low molecular weight heparin for DVT, and CTPA was suggestive of no evidence of emboli, pulmonary venous emboli, and but there is evidence of septic emboli with bilateral loculated effusions, and there was no history of IV drug abuse. Ultrasound chest revealed bilateral loculated collections on both sides, and this is a CT scan showing septic emboli at multiple foci with the multi-loculated effusions, which are predominantly in the paravertebral gutters on the both sides. So under ultrasound guidance, we could aspirate 50 ml on right side and 20 ml on left side, slightly red in color. pH was 7.21 and 7.18 respectively. Exudative effusion with low glucose, and he was continued to have spikes of fever, 101 with hypotension, which was worsening. Initially, it was stabilized with fluid resuscitation and NORAD. The NORAD starts keeping rising up, so that's why we have taken a decision to consider for drainage of parapneumonic effusions bilateral. So as further management, so bilateral VATS has been contemplated, and high risk consent has been taken because the patient was anemic and septic shock, and there is a history of DVT for which he was getting low molecular weight heparin as well. Post-operatively, we have to transfuse 2 units for this patient to stabilize him. This is the picture on one side. So where I'm separating, visceral pleural lung from the chest wall to identify wherever is the loculation. At this point, you will see there is a drainage of pus which is coming from this end, left corner. So carefully, this patient was, many gadgets were used. This is a sponge holder what I am using, and additional lysis was attempted. And look at endoscopic biopsy forceps, which is also helping in debriding all this thick locules. Thick locules have been carefully, yes, because probably patient was on low molecular weight heparin, though we have stopped 24 hours in advance. Okay, there is significant bleeding in this case. I have to transfuse close to on the opposite side. I have to transfuse 2 units of PRBC post-operatively. On the opposite side, the picture was more clear, and using, this is a sponge holder, what we call, using sponge holder, I am trying to removing the peeling of all the infected necrotic material in the pleural space. So another gadget which I use routinely is this Yankas suction device, okay, which will also helps us in carefully using this device, which will facilitate us in additional lysis in most of the tough adhesions. And at the end of the procedure, on right side, this is the amount of material that we have debrided, additionalized and removed the parietal pleural wheel and the locules. And post-operatively, patient post-thoracoscopic ideation, chest X-ray revealed bilateral ICD in situ with well-expanded lungs. He was extubated next day after hemodynamic stabilization. Clinically, he showed gradual improvement. Wound cultures grew MSSA and antibiotics were optimized. His fever subsided, vasopressors weaned off, tachypnea improved, oxygen support tapered, chest X-ray shows improving vocacities, was clinically stabilized and shifted to ward. These are the subsequent X-rays, and the bottom X-rays at the time of discharge, probably around 8th day or 9th day. Patient improved very well. As a protocol, 3 to 4 weeks of antibiotics for parapneumonic effusions have been given in this patient. So what is, learning points from this case, which is a rare case report. After literature research, bilateral thoracoscopic additionalizes for management of, parapneumonic effusion in a patient with, DVT on anticoagulation is very rare, not at all reported so far. We are planning to report this soon. And improperly managed thorn prick can potentially kill the individuals through florid sepsis. Source control is very, very essential in management of septic shock. And remember here, source is migratory. Initially, it was in the lower limb. Now it is the current source of sepsis is bilateral parapneumonic effusions. Timely thoracoscopic management, hit hard and hit fast rule is a recommendation in presence of multiloculated fibrinopurulent stage of parapneumonic effusion, which is non-responsive to conventional therapies. Despite an anticoagulation therapeutic dose, we could offer, in this case at least, thoracoscopic additionalizes safely, but he bled more than normal, hence we have to transfuse this patient. So, whereas in evaluation of lung biopsy, okay, we can, go ahead and then particularly if it is, middle lobe or lingula, this is left lingula showing, applying a stapler, endoscopic stapler in this patient, and it turned to be fibrotic NSIP in this patient, and patient currently doing well. Okay, endoscopic. These are the cases where we are doing, or we were doing initially when the cryolung biopsy was not available, but with the availability of cryolung biopsy, okay, the need of thoracoscopic lung biopsy has significantly came down. And here is an interesting case presentation of management of primary spontaneous pneumothorax. A combined parietal pleural abrasion and talc pleurodesis was offered in this patient, and he is a 25 years male, known smoker for 5 years, presented to ER with gradually progressive shortness of breath, pain in the back of the right side of the chest, dry cough and mild fever since 4 days. And look at the X-ray showing right side pneumothorax with collapsed lung. And after ICD, okay, day 2, he developed further worsening of breathing difficulty, which revealed re-expansion pulmonary edema. Look at this classical re-expansion pulmonary edema signs. And after stabilization, we have taken this patient to thoracoscopy and tried looking for apices. Predominantly in primary spontaneous pneumothorax, the bullae will be seen in the apices. Here, if you see carefully, this is the area, the tethered area on the visceral pleura. This is the area where, okay, the bullae got ruptured. Okay, these are the cases. Okay, this is the area, okay, where the ruptured area of bullae, which was clearly seen. Okay, and these are the cases may not end up most of the times in bullectomy or a lobectomy kind of thing. Just manage with, parietal pleural abrasion. Use a gauge piece and then scrape as much of parietal pleura as much as possible, and then if you scrape it out most of the parietal pleura, okay, then you can this is called mechanical pleurodesis, creating abrasions in the parietal pleura, and combining with Steri-Talc. Okay, so this is how we have done, parietal pleural abrasions throughout the parietal, the chest wall, and then applied the pleurodesis talc, and then So in this patient, surprisingly, the leak persisted, but lung remained, expanded. So what we did is carefully every day we have withdrawn the ICD centimeter by centimeter, and then at the end of 4 5 days we could take off the ICD very happily without any issues. Lung got adhered to the chest wall perfectly, and then patient went home very happily. So another interesting case report, though it is very rare, we encountered in my practice is removal of the needle. This is a patient, a young male from some psychological background. He was fighting with his friends some time back, and then some of his, one of his friend, he has injected a needle into the chest wall, and which landed in the pleural space. Look at the X-ray initially. Okay, the X-ray shows in the PA view showing a metallic needle in the right mid zone, and careful looking at the lateral view, you will see behind the vertebral column in the pleural space, you will see the needle. In the CT scan showing a metallic structure in the right posterior pleural space. So this case, okay, we took the patient was complaining of chest pain, and then we examined, and then we found that this is the cause for this, and then we have identified it, and then this is the needle. Using a two-port technique, we have removed this needle successfully, and look at the post-op chest X-ray, which is very clear. This we published in Lung India, and with this interesting cases, as a pulmonologist, it's our humble responsibility to educate our colleagues so that patients are counseled properly, started on appropriate interventions in an attempt to reduce mortality and morbidity, and to get the world-class care at their front. So it's all our responsibility to take care of our patients properly, and to make them breathe freely, and as a conclusion, and I'm a follower or devotee of Lord Hanuman, and I pray Lord Hanuman that to keep all our medical fraternity, all our pulmonology fraternity and CCA colleagues to have a safe careers while they do interventions, and safe careers, and not to get affected from COVID, and please protect yourself. Okay, and one step ahead, I want to communicate. Okay, if you don't if you're not practicing chanting Hanuman Chalisa, make sure you practice Hanuman Chalisa. I believe in it strongly. Okay, Hanuman Chalisa, I feel, okay, it is protecting in acquiring this COVID infection, and to keep us safe from medical legal issues as well while we do interventions. With this, I hand over mic to Dr. Ema to start question and answers session. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Thank you for a wonderful presentation. Let's take up a few of the questions in the interest of everyone. What I'll do is I'll not ask the questions which have already been covered in your talk, and maybe since everyone would be getting the link towards the recording, it would be helpful to them. So one of the first questions that I'd like to ask is, sir, is it a pulmonologist domain to have a 2 or 3 port instead of the uniport, or is it a surgeon's domain?
Yes, very, Dr. Ema, very good question. Okay, actually, my analogy is like this. Okay, 2 decades, 3 decades back, who were the persons who were using bronchoscopy? It's basically thoracic surgeons. Okay, carefully, we have learned it, and we are doing now. And thoracic surgeons nowadays, they're not at all doing the bronchoscopies. So similarly, okay, any procedure, if you focus for a particular time and number of cases, more number of cases you start doing, definitely you will master it. There is no question of doubt in it. But having said this, so 2-port and 3-port, definitely if someone is venturing, there should be a surgical backup. There is no doubt about it. Surgical backup must be there. That's why I highlighted, whenever we are doing any therapeutic work, I always say my cardiothoracic surgeon and thoracic surgeon to be available within the vicinity of the OT, so that if I encountered any complications, okay, definitely I'll call them. They will be available at any moment.
Okay.
In fact, therapeutic work commonly we do in multilocular diffusions. What happens is, in these cases, okay, it is the moment I hand over the case to surgeon, what they do is thoracotomy. Okay, because it is simple. It's a 1-hour job. But post-operative pain, post-operative morbidity after thoracotomy is very, very difficult, and pain is more in these patients. Recovery time takes long, so there is no need to have that long 20 to 25 centimeter incision on the chest wall. This, if we can carefully do this in a 2-port or 3-port technique, that will be wonderful. Most of my patients, they get discharged in 4 to 5 days time as well.
Okay, so my next question would be, sir, for the people who are started working on the thoracoscopy, when we attend the workshops, it looks very easy, it looks very comfortable that you are able to identify now which side you are going, which site you are going. But when we do it practically, we actually get confused whether we are actually into the site or not, or this is the best area for the biopsy or not. So please guide us on that also.
See, for any procedure, I'm not telling for thoracoscopy alone, for any procedure, yes, we all learned, okay, on animal models, and then, the workshop models, okay, to begin with. But having said this, if you are learning with a giant, okay, please, if you want to practice a pulmonology, you will be practicing for next 30 years or 35 years, God willingly. So that's why my always suggestion to junior colleagues is, be with a master for at least few months, maybe 15 cases, 20 cases. You have to carefully watch, and if you see, if I take myself as an example, what I can quote is, I work with almost close to 8 or 9 surgeons, okay, in my career. Okay, they all taught me a lot. Okay, it's not easy. And but again, having said this, once we get into the pleura, what is the most important step is getting into the pleura without injuring the lung. And as soon as you get into it, okay, you need not put the camera inside. You put the anchor suction or suction device, and then aspirate as much fluid as possible, and then you will definitely, okay, see the things with much clarity. And then once you see the things with much clarity, and then orient yourself, give probably 30 seconds or 1 minute time to orient yourself. What is apex? What is dorsolateral chest wall? What is lung? Where is the diaphragm? Where is the hilum? So carefully, do not touch lung, do not touch diaphragm, do not go towards mediastinum, and restrict yourself to dorsolateral chest wall. It is not a difficult job, but with practice, probably 15-20 cases, anyone would be comfortable.
Thank you, sir. So the next question now goes is there any pre-op parameter which anticipates the poorer outcome in such patients?
Very good question, Dr. Ima. So whenever you are choosing cases, you should be really, careful. So those patients who are really frail and who have a survival expectancy with malignancy, if they are suffering from malignancy and then survival expectancy less than 30 days, do not take for intervention. Maybe, at least for thoracoscopy. Okay, maybe if there is a central airway obstruction, you can offer a stent placement for quality of life. But for thoracoscopy, I don't recommend, because there are much better options available. Indwelling pleural catheter was not available 6-7 years back. Now it is available. Okay, if you don't have an availability of IPC, or if you feel that it is costly affair, you can place an ICD and then leave it. Because just placing an ICD, okay, and following up the cases over 2 to 3 weeks will cause autopleurodesis probably in 30 to 40% of cases. Okay, so careful selection is very important. Second important, when you are dealing with high-end procedures or advanced thoracoscopic procedures like lung biopsy or something, be careful. When their DLCO is less than 40, please do not take up for thoracoscopy.
Thank you, sir. So, in the interest of time, I'm not speaking the names of the person from where they have been putting up these questions. So, these questions have come from a variety of places. Some PGs are willing to ask, why is the incision put between the 4th and the 7th intercostal space?
Question, please, one more time.
Why the incision for the thoracoscopy is put between the 4th and the 7th intercostal space?
Right. To begin with, we all, should take up classical cases so that we should not land in complications. So, ideal indication is, a simple pleural effusion, exudative pleural effusion, which doesn't have any, identifiable etiology. So, this case, 4 to 7 means always the bulk of the muscle is very less there, and then you can, as soon as you start incising, and then you can reach after dissecting intercostal muscle, you will reach the pleura very easily. The thickness is very less. And second important, it is very comfortable to access. When you put the patient in lateral decubitus with the affected side up, okay, it is easily reachable. It is the highest point to reach. This is the reason.
Thank you, sir. Next question has been asked by another person from Hyderabad. He says, can we use unconventional site for the entry guided by ultrasound?
Yes. To be frank, unconventional, let me share my experience. Once I was a postgraduate, okay, where thoracoscopy service was not available. This I'm telling around 13 years back. Okay, I have to drain a posterior loculated collection by placing an ICD in the, I think, 9th space infrascapular. I placed it, successfully I placed it. But having said this, okay, my boss did warn me, okay, Professor G. Ravindra Babu, okay, it is very difficult, to place that one, and do not, venture, because sometimes we may end up in injuring the diaphragm, and sometimes kidney is very close to that place. Okay, it can injure. Having said this, okay, if you are trained with, good thoracic surgeons or thoracoscopic, okay, who are, very good at, therapeutic work, what we do is we enter through this 4 to 7 intercostal space only. Carefully, as soon as we dissect the intercostal muscle, what we do is we insert our finger and then carefully dissect, and then reach the pleural space, and from there we approach the loculated collection rather than entering through the loculated collection.
Okay. So next question would be, what is the role of thoracoscopy in bronchopleural fistulas?
It is definitely not pulmonologist, cup of coffee or tea, whatever it matter. Okay, definitely I would, love to handle always bronchopleural fistulas with the help of a surgeon. But having said this, okay, recently what we encountered is post right lower lobectomy, there was a case, okay, for a stage 2 tumor. Okay, my surgical colleague has, done his right lower lobectomy, following which the patient developed a bronchopleural fistula. Okay, we thought of, doing a emblator device, what it is, atrial septal device, closure device, okay, ASD closure device. Okay, then anyhow, we have given a thought and then discussed in the multidisciplinary team meeting, And then I suggested, sir, why can't we, re-explore one more time? Then sir did, re-explore and then closed with intercostal muscle grafting, and and it healed perfectly fine. So it's a surgeon's domain. BPF is always a surgeon's domain.
Okay. So another interesting question is, what is the difference between a trapped lung and lung entrapment?
Yeah, it's something, a very subtle difference in terms of, pressures and all those things. To be frank, I don't remember. Please pass on that who has questioned me. Definitely, I would love to, answer them after reviewing the literature.
That's it. So there's another question by one of the postgraduates. Will thoracoscopy help in bronchiectasis?
Thoracoscopy, yes. Thoracoscopy, thoracoscopic resection of, lung will definitely help. That's again a surgeon's domain. And if there is recurrent exacerbations, definitely management of bronchiectasis by, if it is particularly focal, limited to one segment or one lobe kind of thing, definitely it will give a lot of good results. In Indian patients particularly, we will see post-tubercular bronchiectasis, which leads to recurrent infections, and hemoptysis is the commonest presentation. Definitely, VATS is a wonderful choice in these patients. But doing VATS in post-tubercular fibrosis patients is pretty difficult. And I know few surgeons who are really, mastered this art. It is wonderful, and then the results will be very good.
Okay. So can we use a bronchoscopic cautery probe to control bleed while doing the thoracoscopy procedures?
Yes, yes, definitely. We can try if it is a small wound. If it is a small wound, definitely we can, control it. And then, as I have spoken in my talk. Okay, the best thing is, okay, take a gauze piece and then apply pressure for 3 minutes. I have seen all my cases except one which has, stabilized with just pressure alone. Okay. Only one case, it landed in, needs exploration and then, suturing.
Thank you so much, sir. It has been a really interesting talk, and I think we have covered all the aspects. A few of the listeners might be worried that their questions have not been asked, but those have been covered by your talk, and possibly the recording would be given to them. Thank you so much, sir. I look forward to having the thoracoscopy workshop under your guidance, and I will be one of the attendees.
Oh my God. No. We have seen your caliber, Dr. Ema. Okay, you have done fantastic job in CCI Pune. You have done, the workshop very, elegant way. Okay, let the COVID be over. Okay, let's meet up. CCI is planning to do national conference. Maybe we haven't finalized the dates. Hyderabad is the venue, and I invite all my CCI colleagues for the event. We will soon finalize based on the second wave. We'll finalize the date, and then looking forward for a physical gathering than this virtual meeting. I profusely thank technical team Vipul and his team, Puneet, Tarun, and Sipla, our CCI members, including our Krishna Anna, Narayan Pradeep, our president, current president Narendra Mehtaku, Ravi Doshi, everyone, they are simply vibrant. Okay, no other society is doing so many webinars in pulmonology. Okay, we are doing, without tirelessly, we are doing this and looking forward for many more webinars from CCI. Thank you, Krishna and Anna and team, for giving me this opportunity. Wonderful moderation, Dr. Ema. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Thank you so much. Thank you, CCI. Thank you, Sipla. We close over.